Welcome to Mountain Bike Express, and this week we're in the shadow of Snowdon for the fourth round of the 7-Up BMBF National Points Series. We're at Beddgelert in North Wales as the series moves up to the highest course of the year, and while Melly will be struggling, the strong climbers will be in their element here. First off with the juniors. The course is an 8-mile loop with 2 major climbs per lap. The highest point is nearly 300 metres at Bike Clarke, which leads into a very rocky descent, so punctures could be a problem. As the junior men set off on the first of their 3 laps, the big news was that Matthew Guy had decided to ride experts instead of juniors, so as to get practice at the longer races before the European and World Championships later in the year. This was quite a gamble. Although only 3 races plus the final counts to the overall positions, and Matt has a maximum of 78 points from 3 wins, it does leave the door open for his nearest challengers, Specialized Alan Gunner and GT's Ollie Beckinsale, to get a win and close the gap. So it's no surprise to see them pulling away from the rest on the climb up to the quarry. By the time they had reached the top of the course, Alan's relentless pace at the front had opened a considerable gap on the chasers, led by Craig Gilman, ahead of James Sutton and Kevin Duckworth, with Rob Thackeray, who had been in third, becoming the first puncture victim. And as Alan headed down the rocky descent, 3/4 of the way round the lap, he had managed to prise Ollie off his rear wheel and was now out on his own. But the battle for third was warming up, with Craig and James now wheel to wheel.
Go on, Alan.
By the bottom of the descent, Alan had opened his lead to 30 seconds and looked more relaxed without anyone right on his wheel. Ollie was again showing his consistency, and it appears only a matter of time till he can get the better of either Matt or Alan in a race. We picked the race up on the 3rd lap, heading up to Llywelyn. Alan was increasing his lead. The 91 and 92 junior hill climb champion was obviously relishing the ascents. With Ollie 1 minute 20 seconds down, Alan's main concern would now be to ride as lightly as possible to minimise the risk of any mechanicals, in particular punctures, which had seen him drop out of round 3 in Aldershot. The main interest was now the race for third, which had seen Craig and James together for the whole of the 2nd lap, and their concerns were entirely with each other, as Ollie was 4 minutes ahead of them in passing tail-enders. As Alan heads down from the top for the final time, victory was almost assured, and though it would be slightly hollow as Matt wasn't racing, Alan would be very grateful for the 26 points. He would now move into 2nd overall, though with Ollie heading for his second on the trot, it was getting tight at the top. The battle for third finally resolved itself with James Sutton getting away on the last descent, but a well-deserved victory went to the leader from the gun. Alan eventually won by over 1.5 minutes, but his and Ollie's dominance of the field showed with nearly a 5-minute gap to third. With Matt's overall lead now only 6 points, he will not dare risk another no-show in round 5. Returning to the international race scene, and the Grundig World Cup had moved to Canada for the 5th round. Alison Sider led the field out, but she was to gain no home advantage as she punctured when leading near the top of the course on lap 1. And guess who was there to take the lead? Julie Furtado. But for a change, it wasn't an easy victory, with Ruthie Mathis looking back in form and taking 2nd place. 3rd place went to Sarah Ballantyne. In the men's race, the lead group of Gerhard Zedrilek, John Tomac, Roger Honecker, Tinker Juarez and Mike Kluger led out for the first lap, until Thomas Frischneck, recovering from a minor mechanical, went to the front and broke the field. But Juarez had the strength to go again, and the big ring climber eventually made Frischneck wilt, with Peter Rich yet again looking strong and playing the waiting game close behind in third. Frischneck's second saw him extend his overall lead, and behind there was yet another shuffle of places. In the women's, all the familiar names were up there, though Caroline Alexander slipped out of the top 5, having failed to finish. To make up for it, she's here to give us a few tips on climbing.
You may not like the idea of it, but if you can sort out climbing, you'll have more energy left for the downhills. Before you hit the hill, select the correct gear at the front, so that if you do have to change gear, it's only at the back, which is easier. Unlike riding on the road, it may not be an advantage to get out of the saddle, because if the track's bumpy, you'll lose traction at the rear. But you have to make sure you keep your weight on the front wheel as well, so the front end doesn't lift up on the steep climbs. Again, look ahead to pick the best line. Finally, try and get into a steady rhythm and control your breathing. And guess what? Practice makes perfect.
At the start of the pros race, you can see David Baker's concentration. He's the series leader, but Nick Craig is only 2 points behind, and third place Gary Ford is in America for the World Cup. So as the field was led out for the start by the pace vehicle, the attention was on those two. As the pacer pulls over, the race was underway, and it was Baker who immediately went to the front of the field. By halfway up the first climb, it was David's teammate and former Tour de France rider, Adrian Timmis, who had taken up the pace. But once again, the whole of the rally team had gathered at the front. Heading up the steep climb to the quarry, and the field opt for a run, in preference to struggling over numerous slimy tree roots. 4 minutes later, and the women were off. Caroline Alexander had joined Gary Ford and Tim Gould in America, so now the series favourites were Formula One's Deb Murrell and Pace's Sian Roberts. Rally's new signing, Sally Timmis, was obviously out to impress her new backers as she led out from Sally Hibberd and Janet Wilkinson, though Deb Murrell was in close attendance. However, Sian Roberts was losing touch with the lead group. Picking the men up as they reached the top of the course, and Barrie Clarke was now pushing the pace, with Adrian sitting in. But they had opened a comfortable 45 seconds lead over the chasing pack, which contained Chris Young, David Baker, Paul Lazenby, Tim Davis, Andrew Wright, Paul Dixon, Richard Thackeray, Dan Cook and Fred Salmon, who was having saddle problems and had to stop for alterations. Heading off the top down a rocky gully, and Barry's superior descending had enabled him to open a slight gap on Adrian, which by the bottom of the descent on lap 1, he had extended to 30 seconds. Adrian, who confesses to being a poor descender, had lost most of his advantage, with the chasers now only 10 seconds behind and led by Adrian's teammate. The single-track descent had spread the group out, and those at the back were now struggling to get back on terms with David and Tim. Back at the top in the women's race, Deb Murrell had taken the initiative and was setting a punishing pace that had stretched out the field on the long climb. And she glances back to see that she has a 200-metre lead as she crests the hill. Heading back down on the rocky terrain, Deb gradually extended her lead to 40 seconds over Sally Hibberd, who was showing the first real signs of form, having taken 1992 off to have a baby. And now the women were catching the slowest of the men's field.
Come on, Deb.
Sian had finally got her engine going and moved up 3 places on the descent, so was now only 20 seconds behind Sally Hibberd. While Sally Timmis was obviously suffering on the rocky descents, with Michelle Bergstrand, Angela Ward and Sarah Cartmel all closing fast. By the bottom of the descent, Deb was out of sight of the rest of the field.